They didn't just walk away. They were removed, because what was about to awaken inside you couldn't be born in front of them. 1. What they took was never meant to stay. They didn't just leave. They didn't just quietly walk out of your life like a passing breeze. They left like a storm, tearing through places you didn't even know were fragile, shaking the walls you thought were strong, and taking pieces of you that you didn't realize you had given away. It wasn't just the loss of a person, it was the loss of meaning, the loss of feeling understood, the loss of that one place that used to feel like safety, even if it was never real. And yet, you're still here. You wake up even when the weight on your chest tells you to stay in bed. You show up to the world even if your soul feels distant. You try to smile even when your heart feels like it's still bleeding. That's not weakness. That's proof that something inside you refuses to collapse. Something sacred is still standing inside you, a part of your soul that knows you weren't created to break. But I know it's hard. I know there are nights where your pillow becomes the only witness to your pain, where you stare at the ceiling, wondering why silence feels louder than screams, where the quiet becomes unbearable, not because it's peaceful, but because it reminds you of everything that's missing. And that's exactly when this message reaches you, not in your strength, not in your healed chapter, but right now, when you're still hurting, still confused, still replaying every word they said before they walked away. You need to know this. You were not abandoned. You were not forgotten. You were not left behind. You were being rewritten. Allah didn't let them walk away because you were unworthy. He let them go because they were blocking what He was about to place in your life. And what's coming is too holy to grow in the presence of people who were only meant to be temporary. They took what you thought was love. They held your heart like it was permanent. They made you feel seen in a world where you had grown used to being invisible. And maybe, for a moment, it felt real. But not everything that feels safe is meant to be shelter. Not everything that feels right is meant to stay. And not everything you lose is a loss. Sometimes it's a rescue. Allah will never allow something to be taken from you, unless He is trying to make space for something greater, something cleaner, deeper, eternal. But right now, it's okay if you don't see that. Right now, your heart is still aching, and you don't want divine wisdom. You just want the pain to stop. That's okay too. Even the Prophet, peace be upon him, experienced moments of heartbreak and deep sadness. Even he cried when he lost what he loved. So who told you your tears make you weak? Sometimes the soul doesn't need answers. It just needs permission to feel. So feel it. Feel the emptiness. Feel the weight of what's no longer there. Feel the hollow space where they once stood. And when you've sat in that silence long enough, you'll start to notice something strange. The silence isn't just silence. It's healing. It's protection. It's Allah covering you, hiding you, repairing you, rebuilding you in a way that only solitude can. Because what was taken from you wasn't yours forever. It was a borrowed piece of your story, a temporary chapter in a book that Allah is still writing. And that chapter needed to end, not to punish you, but to prepare you. You thought it was love, and maybe it was in a human way. But it wasn't the kind of love that Allah writes, because the love Allah writes doesn't confuse your worth. It doesn't make you beg. It doesn't leave when you're no longer convenient. The love Allah writes honors your soul. It protects your light. It brings you closer to Him. So maybe this was never about losing someone. Maybe it was about finding yourself, the version of you that no longer needs to be chosen by people, because you finally understand you were already chosen by Allah. And when He chooses you, you don't chase. You don't beg. You don't shrink to be held. You stand. Even if you're shaking, even if you're alone, even if all you have left is faith the size of a whisper, because that's enough. You didn't lose them. You lost a future that was never going to lead you where Allah wants you to go. You lost a bond that was created in weakness, not written in light. You lost a version of yourself that was willing to accept less, just to feel something. And maybe that's what this heartbreak was always about. Not to take something from you, but to take you out of something that was slowly undoing your soul. You are not ruined, you are not broken, you are not behind. You are being remade by the one who knows every wound, every sigh, every night you begged for something or someone to stay. But what stayed was Allah. Even in the silence, even in the pain, even in the goodbye. And one day, you'll look back and say, what I thought I lost was never mine, and what came after was everything I was always meant to hold. 2. Allah didn't punish you, He protected you. You keep wondering what you did wrong. You keep looking back, tracing every step, every word, every moment. You keep replaying it all, as if somewhere in that replay you'll find the reason they left, the reason you were let go, the reason you were no longer enough. You keep thinking this is a punishment, that maybe Allah is angry with you, that maybe you failed some divine test and now you're being made to feel it in the most personal way possible. But that's not the truth. The truth is softer than that, and deeper, and harder to accept, because it doesn't come with blame. It comes with mercy. Allah didn't punish you. He protected you. He saw something you couldn't. He heard conversations you never did. He witnessed intentions that were hidden from your heart. You were busy holding on to them, but Allah was already letting them go, because what they brought into your life was not peace. It was delay. It was distraction. It was a slow erosion of your soul, dressed up as love, comfort, or connection. And Allah, in His mercy, tore them away, not because you weren't enough for them, but because they were never meant to come with you where He's taking you next. You were attached to someone who couldn't carry the weight of your heart. You gave them access to a soul that was always meant to be held by something sacred, and when they mishandled it, even if unintentionally, Allah stepped in. He doesn't always remove people because they're bad. Sometimes He removes them because they were only meant to walk with you for a season, and you were trying to turn a season into forever, but forever belongs to Allah. You thought you needed them to feel complete. You thought their love was your sign that you mattered. You thought their presence was a reflection of your worth. But Allah had to separate you from that illusion, so you could finally return to the truth. Your worth was never in their hands. It was written by the one who formed you from clay and breathed into you His spirit. He watched you make dua for them. He heard your voice tremble as you asked for clarity. And in His mercy, not His anger, He gave you an answer. But here's the thing no one tells you. Sometimes Allah's answer feels like pain. Because in order to protect your future, He had to break what was false in your present. And that breaking, it wasn't cruel. It was the beginning of your healing. You begged Him for peace, but didn't realize He'd first have to remove the chaos you had gotten used to calling love. You asked Him for guidance, but didn't know He'd have to strip away everything you once leaned on, so you'd finally lean on Him. You asked Him to make you stronger, but didn't expect that strength would be built in a season of deep, aching loneliness. You thought love would feel warm, simple, permanent. But real love, the kind Allah writes, is often preceded by isolation, by protection, by a necessary distance from people who would dim the light He's trying to ignite in you. They weren't your destiny, they were your detour, and Allah removed them because the cost of keeping them was the slow disappearance of you. He didn't want that. He didn't want to see your soul shrink. He didn't want to watch you sacrifice pieces of your dignity just to feel wanted by someone who never truly saw your worth. So He stepped in, quietly, suddenly, painfully, and you called it heartbreak. But it was actually divine interception. It was the invisible hand of your Lord, pulling you back from a place that would have cost you everything. And now you're left with silence, with nights that feel too long, with mornings that carry the weight of unanswered prayers, with memories you're trying to unlove. But beneath all that noise is the whisper of something sacred. I know what they couldn't say. I saw what you didn't. I protected you, even if it didn't feel like protection. Maybe one day you'll look back and understand. Maybe not. But even if the clarity never comes, trust that the mercy already did. Because you were not discarded. You were delivered from a life that would have slowly drowned your soul in a sea of false love and incomplete connection. And one day, when the real love comes, the love that Allah sends, the love that doesn't wound you to feel alive, you'll see why this chapter had to end the way it did. It wasn't cruelty, it wasn't punishment. It was divine protection, it was love, just not the kind you were expecting, and it saved you more than you'll ever know. 3. You didn't lose love, you were released from delay. You keep calling it a loss. You whisper it to yourself in the quiet. I lost them. I lost love. I lost everything I thought was finally real. But what if you didn't lose anything? What if what felt like love was actually a delay, disguised as a blessing? What if Allah didn't take love away from you, but freed you from something that was slowly delaying your becoming? You didn't lose love. You were released from something that was slowing down your soul's journey. You were released from hands that couldn't hold the weight of your heart. You were released from a mirror that only reflected parts of you, not all of you. You thought it was love because it lit you up in the beginning, because it filled the silence, because it made you feel less alone. But there's a difference between being loved and being distracted from your healing. There's a difference between feeling seen and being known, fully, completely, without performance. You see, Allah knows the truth that you were too kind to admit, that what you were calling love was actually attachment, a longing for comfort, a desperation for warmth, any warmth, even if it came from someone who didn't know how to handle your depth. And He knew that if you stayed in that space any longer, you would have begun to shrink yourself just to keep their affection. You would have started dimming your own light, just to be more manageable for someone who never saw your full shine. You kept hoping they'd see you, that they'd change, that they'd finally recognize what you brought into their life. But the longer you waited, the more you started losing parts of yourself in the process. That's not love, that's delay. And Allah, out of love for you, ended it, suddenly, without warning, without closure. Because He had to tear you away from what was slowly numbing your spirit, from what was keeping you too busy to notice your soul was starving. You didn't lose love. You lost a version of comfort that was never meant to carry you to your next level. You lost a connection that was too shallow to withstand the weight of your purpose. You lost a placeholder, not a partner. And I know it's hard to hear that, because your heart was sincere, your intention was real. You gave your best, didn't you? You showed up with your whole soul. You loved with everything in you. You prayed for them. You defended them. You saw the good in them, even when they couldn't see it in themselves. That doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. It means your love was pure, even if it wasn't returned with the same purity. But Allah doesn't waste hearts like yours. He doesn't watch you break and walk away. He doesn't see you cry and remain silent. He doesn't allow pain to enter your life unless it's making room for something greater. And that's what this was. A clearing. A painful, divine clearing of something that looked beautiful on the outside, but would have rotted your spirit if you stayed too long. Because what's coming for you is not the kind of love that flickers under pressure. It's not the kind of love that requires you to earn it, fix it, or beg for it to stay. What's coming is the kind of love that is sent not chased. The kind that comes with peace, not confusion. The kind that grows your deen, not your anxiety. And you weren't going to meet that love while you were still gripping what was only meant to pass through you. So Allah released you, not as punishment, but as mercy, as a redirection, as a divine way of saying, this isn't the one, this isn't the place, keep going. And yes, it hurts, because even delays can feel like destiny when you've waited long enough. But Allah's mercy doesn't always look like comfort. Sometimes it looks like disruption, sometimes it looks like heartbreak. Sometimes it looks like the very thing you begged Him not to do. But one day, you'll understand that your soul was always going to be delayed in that love. And you didn't need a delay. You needed a breakthrough. So no, you didn't lose love. You were freed from what was never love to begin with. You were released from the version of you that was willing to settle just to feel wanted. And now you're walking lighter. Now you're praying deeper. Now you're beginning to understand that real love doesn't delay your growth. It awakens it. What they called love kept you stuck. What Allah is preparing will set your soul free, and you won't have to chase it. Because this time, love will come gently, wrapped in peace, rooted in faith, and carrying the scent of everything you begged for in the dark. For the ache you feel is sacred space being made for something greater. You keep asking yourself why it still hurts. Why does it linger? Why does the ache return every night like it has your address memorized? Why does it whisper through your chest when everything finally feels calm? Why does it grip you in the middle of your prayer, your laughter, your silence? You've tried to numb it. You've tried to distract yourself. You've tried to tell yourself you're over it. But deep down, you know you're not. There's an emptiness inside you that no quote, no friend, no explanation can touch. And maybe you've started to think that this ache means something is wrong with you. But listen closely now. Let your soul hear this. This ache isn't your weakness. It isn't your punishment. It isn't proof that you're broken beyond repair. It's sacred space. Pain doesn't always mean something has gone wrong. Sometimes it means something beautiful is being made. Something eternal, something holy, something you would have never been ready to receive unless something else was first removed. You prayed for closeness to Allah. You asked for strength. You whispered for meaning. You begged for real peace. But you didn't expect that peace would first come. Through a kind of heartbreak that strips you of everything temporary, Allah could have answered you with comfort, with ease, with warmth. But He loved you too much for that. So instead, He created a void, a sacred emptiness in your chest, where all the noise used to live, where people's words used to echo, where your past used to play on repeat, where false love used to rest. And now there's nothing there except silence. But that silence is not abandonment. It's preparation. Because before Allah fills a heart, He empties it. Before He grants deep love, He removes shallow attachments. Before He gives you clarity, He pulls you away from everything that kept you confused. And before He introduces you to what's written for your soul, He gently removes what was only good for your emotions, but toxic for your destiny. So don't rush this ache. Don't try to fill it with noise. Don't call it a curse just because it's painful. Let it be sacred. Let this season of emptiness soften you, slow you down, pull you into places you've been avoiding. Because healing doesn't always begin with answers. Sometimes it begins with divine silence. The kind of silence where your heart finally starts hearing what it was too distracted to feel before. This ache, the one you keep praying away, is actually your heart adjusting to the absence of what it was never meant to carry. You thought that person was home, but home doesn't leave. Home doesn't hurt. Home doesn't make you question your own reflection. And now that they're gone, you're sitting in the quiet ruins, asking what went wrong. But what if nothing went wrong? What if this ache is actually the first sign that everything is finally being made right? That, for the first time, you're not loving from desperation. You're healing in dignity. You're no longer clinging. You're creating space. And yes, it hurts, because what's holy often does. But one day, you'll look back on this ache and realize it was the place where your real life began. It was the moment your heart finally emptied of what was holding it hostage, and it became ready. Ready for the kind of love that doesn't take from you, but adds to you. The kind of love that Allah writes, the kind that doesn't need fixing or fighting, the kind that carries you back to Him, not away. So let the ache stay. Let it stretch your soul. Let it break the old patterns. Let it remind you that you're human and you're healing, because every tear you cry in this sacred silence is washing away the illusions that once kept you blind. And every lonely night is preparing your heart to recognize what's real when it finally arrives. You are not empty. You are being cleared. You are not falling apart. You are being carved open for something greater, something heavier in meaning, deeper in peace, stronger in soul. And when it comes, you'll realize the ache wasn't just pain. It was proof that your heart still feels, still hopes, still longs for what's eternal. And Allah never leaves a heart like that unanswered. 5. They blocked the light, meant to awaken you. You keep wondering why it had to happen like this. Why did they come into your life at all? Just to leave? Why did they make you feel safe, only to become the reason you now find safety hard to trust? Why did Allah let it get that deep, that emotional, that real, if it wasn't meant to stay? But what if the real question isn't, why did they leave? What if the real question is, what were they blocking? Because sometimes the people you cling to the hardest are the very ones standing in front of the door Allah is trying to open for you. You couldn't see it while you were with them, because they made you feel loved, wanted, important. They filled a space that had been aching for attention for years. They touched places you had hidden from the world. They gave you the illusion of healing, but not the roots of it. You thought they were bringing light into your life. But slowly, they began to cast shadows, and you didn't even notice. You started silencing your spirit to keep their presence. You started shrinking your light so you wouldn't outshine their comfort. You started accepting confusion as love, and emotional inconsistency as passion. And even when your soul started to feel tight around them, you stayed. Because when someone makes you feel seen after years of feeling invisible, you'll try to make them your destiny, even if they were only meant to be a mirror. But Allah knows what we don't. He sees the intentions that never touch the tongue. He hears the private whispers of people's hearts. And He saw that you were building something sacred in a space that couldn't protect it. He saw that while you were pouring love into them, they were unknowingly blocking the very light meant to awaken you. So He removed them, not to punish you, not to break your heart, but to save your purpose. Because their presence was starting to cover your calling. And their love, though it may have been real in moments, was too small for the version of you Allah is bringing to life. There are some people who love the current version of you, but would never understand who you're becoming. They love your softness, your silence, your simplicity, but would be intimidated by your spiritual strength if you fully stepped into it. So Allah made space. He didn't just separate you from them, He separated you from the version of you that kept trying to earn what was never truly aligned with your soul. And now, here you are, alone, quiet, trying to understand what just happened, why it ended so suddenly, why someone who once called you everything now calls you nothing, why the messages stopped, why the plans disappeared, why you still look at their name and feel a pull you can't explain. But beneath all that pain is a deeper truth. It had to end. Because the light Allah is pouring into your soul now requires space, it requires solitude, it requires separation from people who cannot hold what Allah is placing inside you. You were meant to wake up, to rise, to build a relationship with Allah that was no longer competing with someone else's attention. But that couldn't happen while your heart was still entangled in their presence. Even if they meant well, even if they weren't cruel, even if part of them did care. Intentions don't equal alignment, and presence doesn't always mean purpose. So Allah took them away, gently for some, violently for others, but always with mercy. Because He knows the light He placed inside you. He knows what it needs to grow, and He knew that if you stayed any longer, you would have settled for a love that couldn't protect your spirit. You don't see it now. You still think of them with tenderness. You still wonder if they were the one. You still blame yourself, wondering if you ruined something that was meant to be. But what if they weren't the one? What if they were the block? What if their chapter had to end? So your real beginning could finally start. The version of you that is coming. The one that walks with Allah in secret. The one that glows even when no one's watching. The one that finally sees love as peace, not proof. That version needed a clean sky to rise in, and they were standing in the clouds. So now the storm has passed. The silence is loud, the ache is heavy. But if you listen closely, you'll feel something else. Light. It's quiet now, but it's building. Inside you, around you, above you. And one day you'll look back and whisper, if they had stayed, I never would have seen this light. 6. You're not waiting for closure. You're waiting for revelation. You keep waiting for something to explain it. You want a message, a reason, a goodbye that makes sense. A moment where they turn around and say, here's why I left, and here's why it wasn't your fault. But that moment never comes. So you sit in the dark, scrolling through memories, replaying conversations that now feel like dreams, trying to solve a puzzle that has missing pieces, and no one to return them. You call it waiting for closure, but what you're really waiting for is peace. You think that peace will come when they finally apologize, or admit what they did, or tell you they still care, just enough to validate the storm they left behind. But peace that relies on someone else's voice was never peace at all. And maybe that's why Allah hasn't let them return. Maybe that's why the door remains closed. Maybe that's why their silence is so loud. Not because you need their words, but because your soul is being taught to stop chasing them altogether. You're not waiting for closure. You're waiting for revelation. Because closure is human. It's a clean sentence at the end of a messy story. But revelation is divine. It doesn't just explain what happened. It shows you who you've become because of it. It shows you the protection hidden in the heartbreak, the growth buried under the grief, the mercy that felt like pain at the time, but now looks like a gate that saved your soul. Right now it feels like a wound that won't stop bleeding. You pray, you cry, you whisper into the night, Ya Allah, just tell me why it had to end like that. Why so suddenly? Why so painfully? Why with so much confusion? And the only reply is silence. But silence is not the absence of Allah. Silence is the answer, because in that silence, your soul is being invited to stop looking for peace in people and start looking for it in Him. They didn't disappear because you weren't worth an explanation. They disappeared because Allah was trying to teach you. That real closure isn't in someone's words, it's in His wisdom. You might never get that text. You might never hear their side. You might never understand how someone could hold you that close and then let you go like you were nothing. But here's what you will get. You'll get strength you didn't know was inside you. You'll get clarity that couldn't exist while you were still waiting on them. You'll get a version of yourself that no longer needs someone else's understanding to validate your journey. And you'll realize, slowly, quietly, painfully, that what hurt you didn't destroy you. It revealed you, because Allah doesn't leave His servants lost in confusion forever. He only delays the clarity until your heart is strong enough to carry it. And by the time you finally understand why it ended, you won't be asking anymore, because something in you will have shifted. You won't need their answers. You won't need their words. You'll have His, the whisper that enters your heart in the stillness. You didn't lose anything. I removed what was delaying your light. You didn't need closure. You needed me. You see, when Allah wants to free you, He doesn't always give you logic. He gives you silence. He gives you space. He gives you time alone, so that the noise of other people finally fades, and you begin to hear your own soul again. And within that soul is something sacred, something patient, something resilient, something that stops waiting to be chosen, because it remembers it was already chosen by Allah. So stop holding your breath, waiting for someone to come back and make it all make sense. It already makes sense. You just haven't grown into the version of you that can see it yet. But you're on your way. Every tear, every sujood, every night you sit with your confusion and ask Allah for peace, is moving you closer to that revelation. And when it comes, it won't just explain what happened. It will make you grateful that it did, because some stories don't need an ending from them. They need a beginning from Allah. And this silence, this ache, this waiting, it's not the end. It's the sacred moment just before your soul finally understands. 7. Your heartbreak was a divine rebuilding in disguise. You think your heart broke the day they walked away, or maybe the day they changed, or the moment you realized they never really loved you the way you loved them. You can still feel the crack in your chest, the way your breath got shorter, the way your whole body remembered the pain, long before your mind could process it. Heartbreak doesn't just visit the heart, it settles in the bones. It hides in your silence. It shows up in your sujood, in your voice when you say their name in dua, even after you've stopped saying it out loud. You keep calling it heartbreak. You keep saying, I was ruined after that. But what if you weren't ruined? What if that heartbreak was the beginning of your rebuilding? What if the pain that crushed you was actually carving out space for a version of you that couldn't be born while they were still there? It didn't feel divine, did it? No, it felt human. Too human. It felt like betrayal, like confusion, like being seen one day, then erased the next. It felt like everything you built with them. Every word, every plan, every sacred moment was destroyed in an instant. But Allah doesn't destroy without rebuilding. He doesn't break your heart, unless what's inside it needs to be freed. And sometimes the prison is made of people. Sometimes the bars are made of comfort, of familiarity, of old dreams that no longer fit the person you're becoming. You didn't just lose love. You lost a version of yourself that thought love was supposed to hurt like that. You lost the you that was willing to shrink just to keep someone who never really saw your soul. Allah didn't let your heart shatter to ruin you. He let it break, so the pieces that didn't belong to you could fall away, because you had wrapped your identity around someone else's affection, and He saw what you couldn't. That you were beginning to forget who you are when no one's looking, so He let the bond collapse. He let the messages stop. He let the attachment burn itself out slowly, painfully. And you thought it was the end, but it was the opening. That crack in your chest, it's where the light entered. That ache you couldn't explain, it was the sound of illusions falling off your soul. Because how could Allah give you a love that's written in peace, when you were still holding on to a version of love that was written in survival? You weren't growing in that love. You were tolerating. You were explaining your worth. You were waiting to be chosen again and again by someone who kept forgetting how rare you are. That wasn't love. That was a lesson, and it was loud, and it was sharp, but it was mercy. Mercy in disguise, because sometimes Allah won't let you stay where you're comfortable if it means dying slowly in a space that looks like love, but quietly suffocates your spirit. So He let the heartbreak happen, and it broke you open. It made you cry in the middle of the night when no one was watching. It made you question your worth, your prayers, your softness. It made you kneel on the prayer mat, whispering, "Ya Allah, why would you let this happen to me?" And that's when the rebuilding began. Not with loud breakthroughs, not with healing quotes or happy distractions, but in the quiet. In the nights you cried and still got up for Fajr. In the days you wanted to text them, but made dhikr instead. In the moments you felt unloved and turned to the one whose love never leaves. That's when Allah started rebuilding you, not all at once, not in a way anyone else could see, but piece by piece, prayer by prayer, tear by tear. He was shaping a version of you that is no longer built on being needed by someone else, but on being known by Him. You're not broken. You're becoming the kind of soul that walks with dignity, even in silence. Becoming someone who no longer begs for clarity from people who thrive in confusion. Becoming someone who doesn't shrink to be held, but expands to be chosen by what is real. And one day, maybe not today, maybe not even soon, you'll look back and whisper something powerful. That wasn't heartbreak, that was awakening. It didn't ruin me. It released me. It didn't destroy me. It delivered me. Because I was never meant to stay broken. I was meant to rise, just like I was always designed to. But first, Allah had to break the cage I called love, so I could finally fly free into the one that was written for me. 8. What Allah replaces is always eternal. You cried over what left. You begged for it to stay, even after it became clear that it wasn't staying. You gave it chances. You forgave what hurt you. You held on to something already slipping, not because you didn't see the signs, but because your heart was just that loyal. And when it finally disappeared, it felt like something inside you went with it. The laughter, the warmth, the vision of the future you had been secretly building around them. Gone. You mourned them like a death. And it was one, wasn't it? The death of a version of you, the version that still believed they would come back, the version that still believed love alone could make someone stay. But now, it's just you. You and this wide, echoing silence. You and the nights that feel endless. You and the ache that visits when no one else does. And yet somehow, in the silence, in the absence, you're beginning to feel something. Not loud, not fast, but steady. A peace that didn't come from closure. A softness that didn't come from their apology. A healing that isn't tied to anything they ever said. It's coming from somewhere else, from something higher. It's coming from Allah, because what left was replaced, not by someone else. Not immediately, not with grand entrances or perfect timing, but with something sacred, something your heart couldn't hold while it was still full of them, something that couldn't be delivered while your soul was still cluttered, with conversations that never brought peace. You see, Allah doesn't replace in haste. He replaces in wisdom. He removes the temporary dash to make room for what lasts. And when He replaces something, it's not just better, it's eternal. You didn't even realize it. But your soul had been living on borrowed light. You were feeding your heart with connection, but starving it of purpose. You were surviving on attention, but aching for alignment. And Allah, in His mercy, stepped in. He took what you thought you couldn't live without. Not to destroy you, but to show you what real presence feels like. His. Because real love doesn't confuse you. Real love doesn't make you feel like you're hard to love. Real love doesn't pull you away from your Creator just to hold you closer. And when Allah brings you love again, you'll know it. Not because it's perfect, but because it will feel peaceful in your chest. You won't feel like you're walking on glass, waiting to be enough. You'll feel steady, safe, seen by someone who recognizes that your soul was formed in worship, long before it ever needed to be adored by people. And if he doesn't bring someone right now, it's not because you've been forgotten. It's because he's still making space, not for a person, but for purpose, for strength, for your full return to him. Because sometimes what he gives you after heartbreak isn't another heart to hold. Sometimes it's your own. Sometimes it's the version of you that no longer compromises your values just to feel chosen. Sometimes it's the spiritual maturity to walk away from what you once begged for. That is the beginning of eternity, not eternity with someone, but eternity with Allah. And in that space, you begin to realize you never really needed what was taken. You just needed time to see, to feel, to remember what love was always meant to be. Not something that wounds, but something that worships. Not something that takes, but something that brings you back to who you were before the world told you to be small. And when the time is right, when your soul is healed, when your silence has been honored, when your love for Allah is no longer competing with anyone else, He may send someone who doesn't interrupt your peace, someone who protects your prayers, someone who doesn't delay your growth, but reflects it, and you'll smile because you'll know. This wasn't a replacement. This was what it was always supposed to be, something eternal, written by Allah, protected by Him, delivered when your soul was finally strong enough to carry it. Let this silence remain. Don't rush away from it, because somewhere within it, your soul just heard what it's been waiting years to understand. They didn't destroy you. Allah was just making space for something eternal. And soon, you'll know exactly why it had to happen this way.